Does the name Ron Enroth mean anything to you? Does that name ring a bell? My sociology professor, to give you a little context, at Westmont, Dr. Ronald Enroth, he's since passed. He was 74 when he taught my course at college, but he was, at the time, the most recognized cult expert and infiltrator. He was at Jonestown. He got into the Branch Davidians.
Was he involved in deprogramming?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he was.
Now, was it the forcible deprogramming, like similar to with Rick Allen Ross, where you actually would hold someone against their will and believe that they had like psychologically unplanned them? Do you know about that?
I do know about that.
Okay.
I don't feel comfortable saying whether or not he was because I know he did reprogramming. He did discuss it a lot during his courses, but I don't know that he actually was the like snatch and grab the kid thing, which is. I know sometimes it's got to be necessary sometimes, right? It has to be. I mean,
so
some of these groups.
He infiltrated Jonestown?
Yes.
Really?
Again, he was 74 when he taught me, and I was at Westmont in 2010, something like that.
Yeah.
And he'd been in the field. I mean, he was like, apparently at the time, he was the OG for this particular field. I mean, he'd done it for 40, 50 years.
What was his motive for going into Jonestown? Was he in any way associated, like working alongside like the FBI, the CIA, or anyone like that?
From what I remember, he did work with authority figures. I don't believe directly. I believe he got involved. He was involved with that particular group, Jones's church, before they went into, was it Uganda?
Guyana.
Guyana.
Yeah.
Before he moved his group there, he knew him when he was in their first location, or wherever their location was stateside.
Yeah.
He played a participating role in warning the governmental figures about what was happening at Jones's church, and really just kind of what was possible to happen. Because up until that point, correct me if I'm wrong, there hadn't been a cult that had gone quite so horribly wrong to the point where you had something like that happen ever.
No one had drank the Kool-Aid.
No.
Yeah, which is funny because when you actually look at Jonestown, I mean, the drink the Kool-Aid has almost become like a pejorative.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, even now, I don't know, have you heard the Jonestown death tape?
Yes.
Okay. So
I listened to it last night. I didn't sleep for the first.
I know that messed me up. Our very first episode we ever did.
No,
can you find it?
Explain it to us.
Yeah, it's called Q42. There's this. It was the
YouTube.
University,
On YouTube?
University of San Diego, and they have a whole section called the Jonestown Archive. It's a whole list of everything historical documents, all of his sermons, all of his messages.
Yep.
And we found out. I had no idea there's an actual tape of when they drink the potassium cyanide.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, when I've heard that tape, so honestly, it's almost. Like, to talk about drinking the Kool-Aid, I feel it almost sort of strips these people who got sucked into Jones's movement of their humanity, because when you actually people understand how could someone actually do like that, but we don't. What we have to understand is that all of us are so incredibly suggestible and are open to undue influence, like Steve Hassan talks about his bite model. And so when we're in Guyana, like he had done all these propaganda videotapes, because what happened, just backtracking, is that there's a lot of allegations which were true of Jim Jones abusing people.
Right.
Both, I think it was in San Francisco and in Los Angeles were the two locations of the People's Temple.
I didn't realize that abuse included sexual abuse.
Yeah.
I didn't realize he was like to the
Both
to the men and the women.
Two men and women. Yeah.
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 Again, it was very fascinating to me when I first had Ron Enroth as my not my coach, as my professor in college.
Right.
I kind of became engulfed with this whole topic, and now in the last 72 hours, really kind of diving back into it has just been a big refresher course for me.
Right.
The similarities between so many of these cult leaders and enthusiasts, it's kind of startling.
Yeah.
Like, oftentimes, they follow trends. They want certain things. They demand certain things of their followers. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, what follows these really dangerous leaders?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of times if you just look at Jones, for example, it's just people wanting to belong to something. And usually they exploit some sort of crisis, either both in someone's own personal life, but also taking advantage of the current social economic status or whatever's going on at that time. As far as
when was he again?
Goes.
In the 70s?
Yeah, no, he started around he started the People's Temple around the 1950s and the 1960s. And so what he really did is he took advantage of, he exploited really the civil rights movement. So he started the group, the People's Temple, which is really about socio-economic equality. And so what you end up seeing is just a lot of interesting historical tidbits. So in Indiana, his son, Jim Jones, I think it was Jim Jones Jr., was the first black, him and his wife, Marceline Jones, it was the first black adopted child that time, because he was just trying to show that he really cared for those sort of people. I think there's probably part of him that honestly like cared for those people, but he had these ulterior motives. And so a lot of times Jim Jones actually gets portrayed in such a way to paint Christians in a negative connotation. But the reality is that he is both a Marxist, he was actually an atheist. And his view is he most likely even had a lot of Eastern worldview. He believed there's this thing called this divine economic socialism, where everyone was part of one single collective entity. When you actually look at his sermons, it's far different from anything. The only time he'd ever appealed to the Bible was drastically out of context.
Sure.
And so,
as most of them do. That would be one of the
Right.
bullet points that I think a lot of these leaders take on, is they use scripture out of context.
Twist it
Yeah.
for a certain narrative.
Right.
Yeah.
And to what you said, I think oftentimes these leaders may have, not to quote Tyrion Lannister directly, but they use honest feelings to do dishonest work. That is maybe a case that, at least in the beginning, now as time goes on and eventually when it's like, hey, I'm going to sleep with all your wives, take all your money, and your job is to sit there and watch. Right. Now your motives are probably, dishonest for dishonest. But in the beginning, maybe they go into it with some kind of a good intention, trying to help people.